Thank you very much, Your Excellency Alhaji Dr. Mahmudu Bawumia. Now we enter the next phase of our event, where we will have a Q&A session with His Excellency. After that, we'll hand him over to our audience here and around the world to place their questions to him as well. But Evans, 103 revelations in not much more than half an hour.
One day, one achievement. I'm seeing a headline already written for tomorrow.
No doubt.
So we'll ask a few questions, and the Vice President, once he's done answering those questions, and then we'll hand over to the audience to take over. We're just going to moderate. We're not going to, simple clarifications, no hard probing stuff. But let me ask on some of the things you touched on. We'll start with the economy, the economic area. You cut petroleum tax from 17 to 15%. And this is a real bread and butter question for many. You would expect that after that cut, transport fares will do a similar dance. We've had a 15% increase in transport fares since that was done. How do you explain that to the ordinary Ghanaian in your village who now has to pay 15% more, although you've just told her that one of the achievements in the 100 days is you've cut the petroleum tax?
Yes, thank you very much. I think one of the areas we've had to deal with has been these transport fares areas. And the GPRTU and the private operators, remember, government doesn't set transport fares. They are set by the transport operators, but there's usually a discussion that takes place. They made their case. In fact, from what we gathered, they wanted to increase by 30% because they had not increased transport fares apparently from around March last year coming through, and they wanted a higher increase. Because fuel prices had gone up in the interim and so on. This is all to deal with matters that happened before even the budget was read. The exchange rate was moving, spare part prices were going up. And so we were hoping that with the budget, we will have a much less demand for that increase. It didn't happen. But what you are seeing is that what government controls, STC, Metro Mass, there's been no increases in the prices of those areas, of those particular companies. They are still maintaining. So all I can hope is that as the economy continues to stabilize and fuel prices, hopefully we are able to bring them down, and the exchange rate continues to hold firm, and we implement the spare parts tax removal in terms of import duty, we hope and we will ask that once there is a reversal in those factors that made them increase the prices by 15%, they should similarly reduce the prices when the next review comes in. So this is what we are going to be hoping to do. But we did fight hard to sort of try to temper the increase that they did. As I said, they came to try to increase it by 30% when they came to the table. But the minister was able to negotiate, and they agreed that, maybe they could do 15% instead. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now, let's stay on the economy for a moment and remain on these tax cuts, particularly one you've mentioned a few times, the removal of the import duty for spare parts. There are some who criticize this particular tax cut. They suggest that in the long term, it might have a negative effect on our country. It's going to encourage the continued use of second-hand vehicles. It's going to encourage the emissions of these toxins and noxious gases into the system because our vehicles are not going to be as new and in good condition as they should be, since it's easy and cheap to buy spare parts. They wonder whether it wouldn't have been more prudent to use taxes to encourage the public transport system instead, so people will park their cars at home. And,
well, I think it's not either or. You can do both. I don't share the view that removal of import duty on spare parts results in people, buying, old parts or old cars. In fact, spare parts are very expensive, and people don't replace them. And so we have accidents on our roads. Brake pads fail and all of that. So if you can replace your parts, you are in fact more encouraged to buy newer parts rather than buy old ones, because you don't have to pay duty on them. So I would rather think that the policy is one that actually will encourage the use of newer parts in our vehicles.
Let's talk about the tax cuts. Yes. Stay on that same theme. You promised in the 2016 manifesto to, quote, reduce the corporate tax rate from 25% to 20%.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all part of the one achievement, one day that I had.
Well, absolutely, but we never promised to do it in the first 100 days. We met with AGI, for example, during the budget discussions, and we discussed with them some of the tax cuts. We were actually very surprised that for this year, they were saying their problem was not corporate taxes, but just staying in business. So if we don't make profit, tax cut doesn't mean much to us. But so give us the sort of reliefs that will allow us to make profits. You see what I mean? So that was, I think, we looked at all of this. And so this is why we are engaging ECOWAS now to be able to remove duties on equipment and raw materials, which is what is going to be the next phase. And if we are able to do it this year, we do it. If we are not able to do it by the end of the year, we implement it in the next budget. But that, again, will help us increase production quite significantly. So you have to manage the budget. You can't do every cut that you want to do in the first year, but there's still 3 more years to go. But I think we've moved in a direction that is sufficiently clear that you are really encouraging the private sector. You're giving them the incentives to increase production. And that is where we are headed.
So the cuts will come for the corporate tax?
We hope so. We hope so.
That's not definite.
Oh, no. There's nothing that is definite.
The manifesto was definite.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying that you're not going to do it this year, but you're going to do it
before the expiration of your 4th
Absolutely.
year.
Absolutely.
While we're on the manifesto, another promise that was very definite in there was that you would reduce taxes on electricity tariffs to provide immediate relief to households and industry.
Sure.
It's been 100 days. Where is the immediate relief?
Well, I think that we've reduced some taxes on electricity, as I mentioned in my presentation. So in that context, we've fulfilled that promise of reducing those taxes. Of course, we could always do more, but fundamentally, you are going to have to address this relief matter more fundamentally. The cost of electricity is high. We've signed some pretty bad deals as far as electricity production is concerned. Our fuel costs are high, so we are reducing. In fact, we are renegotiating terms of fuel supply, for example, and we are saving about $15 million a year as a result of the renegotiations that have taken place. So you are trying to deal with the problem more fundamentally. If you are going to deal with the cost of electricity matter also, you have to deal with the issue of the legacy debt that is in the industry, for example, and how you actually solve it. And we are in the process of solving that legacy debt issue, which is about $2.4 billion, which would allow the balance sheets of VRA and the other operators in the sectors to become healthier. And therefore, you are not going to have to charge consumers for all these inefficiencies that we are. We are paying the highest cost of electricity in the sub-region. So I think that we've done a bit in terms of reliefs, but there's still more that is going to come on the way.
Final question on economy, then we'll move on to other key areas that you touched on.
Yeah.
Mr. Vice President, at a Central University lecture on the topic, the IMF bailout, will the anchor hold?
Yeah.
You said, quote, government has also agreed to begin the rationalization of public sector staff through a combination of worker layoffs and voluntary retirements. My understanding is that government wants the agreement to delay the worker layoffs until after the 2016 elections. I wonder why. I suppose the message is, vote for me before I fire you, end of quote. As it turns out, you now have inherited the program after the 2016 elections. Seeing that you are bound by the IMF agreement, Mr. Vice President, will you now lay off the workers?
Well, thank you very much. It is right. I remember those words very clearly, that we have inherited an IMF program. And it's a program that we are quite committed to completing. We are not going to, I mean, there are a number of things that we are going to have to relook at, even within the context of the program. We are not going to do any worker layoffs. We believe that if you, in fact, do a rationalization, you end up probably needing more workers in many of our places. So I don't think that, and this issue really has not come up in our discussions so far, but we are not going to, we will have pushback if this issue comes up. We are not going to go ahead with a layoff of workers, yeah.
So we renegotiate with the IMF on
that? Yeah, if it comes up. As I said, we have not brought it up.
It's in the deal. You said it's in the deal.
Yes, but we are not going to lay off workers. Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Vice President, let's talk a little bit more about another issue, security. Now, the President has condemned this vigilante group Menace 4 times so far. But their acts have become even dastardlier each time, with party executives and financiers openly supporting and defending the criminal acts of these NPP vigilante groups. Are you surprised that the President's words have so far had no effect?
Well, I would not agree that the President's words have had no effect. The President has been very forthright in his condemnation, and we've all agreed to that. I mean, that if there's any behavior that breaks the law, it doesn't matter which party you belong to. It doesn't matter whether you are MPP or NDC. The law is the law, and the law will be enforced. You will not see Nana Akufo-Addo releasing someone who has been jailed because he's an MPP volunteer. No, the message that he has sent as a result of the arrest, remand, fining of these people who broke the law is a clear message to the country that regardless of your political party, you cannot hide behind the cover that I'm an MPP member so I can break the law with impunity. No, if you break the law, you will be dealt with. You are not going to see ministers lining up to sign petitions to ask him to release them, or he will not release them in any case. So for us, it's a different thing. You know, if you say you belong to the MPP, or if you belong to the MPP and you misbehave, the law is going to deal with you. And that message, I'm sure, will get through.
Does it not create a difficulty, however, that leading members of your party, you know, the regional chairman for the Ashanti region, your stronghold, one of the biggest financiers and a member of parliament, have all openly supported the criminal acts of these people?
I've not seen open support of criminal acts, but what I will tell you is that everybody is free to make whatever statements they want. But the law, if you fall foul of the law is going to work. The rule of law, that is what it is. So, you know, that is the message that is out there. Regardless of who you are, if you fall foul of the law is going to work. And the President is not going to condone all of those things. And if you are in prison, you are in prison. You know, the President is not going to pardon you.
Now, your ministers may not be lining up to sign petitions, but if a member of parliament and a leading financier like Mr. Kennedy Japon says that if he were there while this group were committing the crime of assaulting the president's appointee, he would have encouraged them to slap him harder. Does this not create a difficulty for the presidency that wants to be seen to be clamping down on these things? Yeah, Can you not clamp down on Kennedy Japon?
Well, there's not a matter of individuals. I think if you then reduce it to personalities, you lose the point. The point should be, overall, you have to obey the law. And the law of Ghana says certain behaviors cannot be countenanced. And if you fall foul of the law, regardless of which party you are, you'll be dealt with. The problem would have been if these people had committed acts which were criminal and they were let go because they were MPP. That would be a problem. And so we are sending the message, a very clear message, that you will not be let go. And that message, once it sinks in, will alter behavior. And I think it was a very clear message that Nana Akufo-Addo sent and that the party sent. And I'm sure that message will fall through.
So to clarify, there will not be any clamping down on Mr. Kennedy Agyapong for these comments.
Why do we need to reduce it to individuals? We've set a framework for what should guide behavior, and that is the framework we are implementing.
And shortly, we'll bring in our audience on this all-important conversation. And just before we do that, one question on transition, a very, very important area, because we just come out of a very important one, and there are all manner of suggestions about how to make it better the next time. But I have a question for you on your official residence. It was part of the things that came up during the transition. You complained about it. In fact, you famously questioned if the building was constructed with blocks of gold. Mr. Vice President, give us closure on this matter. What are you going to do about that building? A building on which we've already spent, if my guess is right, $9 million. What are you going to do about it?
Well, I think that decision will have to be made. I mean, it's a state building, it's not my building. I raised an issue about the cost of it. And the cost of that building is some $14 million in Ghana when the land is free. And it's not like a big plot of land, I gather. You built a house for $14 million. I thought it was very unusual. And so I raised the issue. I've seen the plans and the estimates and so on, and I thought it was ridiculous. And so how we deal with it is something that is still under discussion, but because, as you say, some money has already gone into it, and we will need to spend quite a lot of money. Which we could have built 10 houses for spending that money. So a decision will have to be reached, but I cannot be a part of that decision because it's a house being built for the Vice President. So I'll leave it to other members of government to reach a decision as to how they do it.
So, Kojo, it's time to now invite our audience to join the conversation and interact with the Vice President. And we have our producers with microphones and the address in the T-shirts, the Joy News T-shirts. Mama V is to my left here where Kojo's aisle is, and we have Patricia with the microphone there also on my right. If you have a question, you raise your hands. They will come to you with a microphone, and then you ask your question. Mama V, I see you have a microphone that's been given to... Yes. So kindly, sir, tell us quickly your name very briefly, and your question has to be succinct.
Okay, thank you very much. Mine is not a question, but it's more or less like to commend government in the achievement, because my interest lies within the cocoa industry, and I want to show an appreciation to the government and the Vice President by having a stable price agreement with Ivory Coast. I think it's a very good decision and agreement which is something that is long overdue, and we appreciate what government has done. It will go a long way to make pricing very, very easy so that there won't be too much smuggling out of Côte d'Ivoire and all other neighboring countries. So I commend government for that initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Gabriel Benakwe, who is the chairman of the Coalition of NGOs in Health. Hello, Gabriel.
Yeah.
Gabriel, what's your question, please?
Yeah, thank you. Congratulations, Dr. Bawumia.
Thank you.
Greetings from Duri.
Thank you.
That's the holy land of my great-grandfather, S.D. Dombo. Yeah. And we appreciate you coming to our last funeral when my last grandfather died.
Thank you.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
So on behalf of the Dombo family, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now, I am not certainly happy as the national representative for civil society and women and children in Ghana. After all the 103 achievements, I have not seen or heard any substantial investment and plans in the health sector. And I'm talking about HIV and AIDS. I'm talking about expanded program for immunization. Every year, Ghana misses over 200,000 children because we are not able to fund vaccines appropriately. Non-communicable disease is now the order of the day, is overtaking malaria and HIV. And there's the need for investment into that sector. You have advocated and talked so much about the national health insurance reform. And today, we didn't hear anything about that. You have also talked about financing mental health care in Ghana, and more especially having regional specialized mental health hospitals in the middle belt and the northern regions of Ghana. All these things I have not heard today within the 100 days. Can you please tell Ghanaians your plans you have to help the health system, because the health system in Ghana is now in a transition. As you have already moved from transition, but the health sector is still in transition. What are the plans you have to transform the health system now, more especially mental health, national health insurance, non-communicable diseases, and expanded program on immunization? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before you do the answering, just want to add to that a bit more specific on the National Health Insurance Scheme. In the manifesto, you promised to increase funding for it. It's not part of the 103 achievements you put out there. Should I assume then that you haven't achieved that yet?
Thank you very much. I think in that case, I should make it 104. Because we have increased funding to the National Health Insurance under the budget. We have 300 million Ghana cedis more this year in the budget for National Health Insurance. So I think that is the case. But I think you're raising some very, very important issues. Of course, if you look at the budget, we are dealing with issues of mental health and communicable diseases and so on. But these have not yet materialized. Of course, in 100 days, you are not going to do that. In the area of mental health, for example, I found out that the LI that we needed to lay to really underpin the Mental Health Act had not yet been done. The LI has not yet been done. So we've called for it, and we are going to lay that LI to then operationalize the Mental Health Act. That was one of the things I found out recently, and we are going to do it. So I think that in the area of health, we are looking very seriously at making sure that the National Health Insurance Scheme can be sustained, to provide more funding for it. We are beginning next week with payment of arrears. There have been arrears since March 2016 or so in the National Health Insurance, and a lot of service providers are in trouble. And if you don't settle these arrears, you have problems in the system. And so we have allocated funds in the budget to settle these arrears, and we are starting next week. And you will see, I think, a good response from suppliers in that. And we also anticipate, as we go on from 2017 to 2018, a lot more resources also coming in to support national health as we get a lot more inflows into the budget from additional oil production, from additional economic growth, and so on. We are prioritizing health and education, as we have said in the budget, and you will see a lot more going into the National Health Service, National Health Insurance Scheme for us to make it work.
Your Excellency, I'd like us to hear a question from Mr. Kwabena Otu. He is the Director of Research and Policy at the TUC.
Yes, Mr. Otu.
Thank you, sir. And We are grateful for the attempt to review the IMF package. We are actually also grateful for the recruitment done in the public service currently, over 11,000 nurses, and also the fact that the extension officers you are recruiting. But my real question actually has to do with the labor market institutions. We are witnessing a state in which there is increasing worker right abuses. We have the Mawako incidents, and then also the incidents at TV3. And all boils down to the fact that the institutions that are supposed to inspect, monitor enterprises and make sure that they comply with the labor regulations of the country are hugely under-resourced. So you take, for instance, the National Labor Commission. It has 7 commissioners, all working part-time. And my understanding is that their monthly salaries are actually in arrears. You take the Factories and Inspectorate Division. They have only 7 inspectors who are supposed to inspect all factories across the country. Definitely, that cannot be done. But if you look at the 2017 budget, the entire ministry and its agencies has been allocated about 60 million Ghana cedis, which is about 0.01% of the total appropriation bill. And indeed, 0.04% of what has been allocated to the Office of the President. My question is, what plans do you really have for revamping the ministry and its agencies? Because at the end of the day, we need to scientifically determine what all these policies you have outlined, how would they impact on jobs? And you don't want a situation where a minister will say, we have created 3 million jobs and nobody else can challenge that minister about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much. I think, my brother is raising a very key issue as far as worker rights and abuses of worker rights are concerned. Of course, as you've seen in the cases that you've talked about, the law will have to take its course once that happens. But you've raised a more important issue about the institutions that are supposed to actually oversee that some of these things don't happen. And I think that is where government should focus on. And I take this as pointing us in the right direction and raising an issue that we may not have addressed. But I think we should address it. And we'll definitely be looking at it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I'll now take a question from Abena Osai, who is a student of the Wesley Girls Senior High School. Is Abena here? Yeah. Yes, Abena, please ask your question.
Thank you. My name is Abena Osai Odro, a student of Wesley Girls High School, Cape Coast. First, I'd like to deem it a great opportunity to be here, and I'd like to appreciate the fact that your government deemed it necessary to organize this platform. If I may proceed with my question. In recent times, the whip has been cracked on illegal mining, popularly referred to as Galamsey, with a strong caution sent to the people of China. Your Excellency, my question for you today is, what is going to happen to the labor force of this operation, and how are their skills going to be used efficiently since they are no longer in employment? Or are they to join the unemployed people in Ghana? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abena. I think this is a question that has been on the minds of many Ghanaians. How do you tackle the Galamsey menace in a sustainable way and in a way that is not disruptive to the society? What we have seen, of course, is that the Galamsey operations have virtually destroyed our water bodies. Water is like brown all over. I mean, and this is really a problem for us. And you see water treatment plants are even shutting down. They can't process water. And so you are having water shortages all over. And we can't, it's not sustainable. Otherwise, very soon we will have to be importing water. Ghana here. So we have to stop it. We've looked at various country experiences. Nana Akufo-Addo set up a team to evaluate this. We looked at Colombia, Brazil, and so on, in terms of how they dealt with these issues as well. What is clear is what exactly the point that you are getting at. What is clear is that you are not going to deal with this menace only by brute force. Because a lot of people are engaged in these activities because of unemployment. They are looking and desperately looking for a means to eke out a living. That is the reason. And so this is why we are saying under the multilateral mining integrated project that we are outdooring, you're going to have a sustainable way of dealing with this problem. You want to stop it, but in a sustainable way. And that is why, as part of this program, whilst you are stopping the mining in river bodies and so on, small-scale mining, and also directing them, you are prospecting on their behalf and directing them to specific areas where they can actually prospect. So some of them will continue in small-scale mining, but they will still be regulated, right? Then you also have the issue of finding alternative livelihoods. And this is why we believe that agriculture, for example, is a major area that we are going to be focusing on to create jobs. The planting of trees and afforestation is also going to be another major area and where we can repair the damage. But we need to grow this economy so that alternative livelihoods can be found. So your point is very, very much correct, that you cannot just say you've stopped Galamsey without thinking of what are they going to do. We don't want them to move into criminal activity or other antisocial behavior. So that is why this multi-sectoral mining integrated project achieves a balance between stopping it, providing them alternatives for mining, as well as looking for alternatives for other jobs outside of mining. Thank you.
Our next question is from the President of the Ghana National Association of Teachers, Madam Philippa Larson.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Honorable Vice President, for that wonderful delivery.
Thank you.
Of one day, one achievement. Congratulations. Honorable, in your budget, you have increased the capitation grant by 100%. And I believe you are aware of what the capitation grant is supposed to do in the various schools. I want to remind you that they are to improve access, help in school management, provision of teaching and learning materials, school facility and welfare services. It means that we have to use part of that same amount to write examination. You have stated in your budget that you come out with a legislative that will discontinue parent support to the various schools. Knowing very well that we have a problem at the basic level, what do we do? Especially when you are thinking of having continuous stakeholder meetings with senior high school so that they will support the delivery of education at the senior high school levels. That is my first question. My second question is on reforming and strengthening the human resource at the GES level. My Honorable Vice President, I believe you are aware that the issue of resourcing the human resource goes beyond payment of salaries. Since 2012, not even a peso has hit the account of any district directorate of education. Meanwhile, you are also aware that they will have to organize training and retraining sessions for teachers to be able to upgrade our skills. They are supposed to go around to supervise schools and all that. And so what are we also going to do at that level where nothing, not even a peso has been sent to the directorates of education? My third one is on the issue of you identifying that in government quest to deliver quality of education, there has been persistence, supply of untrained staff, and we also have a percentage of teacher attrition. I believe you have been able to identify the cause, and I want to ask what practical steps you are going to take to curb the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. And we'll just ask that you do ask one simple question so that we can, great questions, so that we can, everybody here who asks a question can get time to do so, because time is very, very limited. Mr. Vice President, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that there are a number of questions, the capitation grant matter, performing and strengthening HR at the GES level. It is true that, of course, we've increased the capitation grant, and that is supposed to help. Now, your question has to do with parents' support and whether that will be, or the discontinuation of that will negatively affect the ability of schools to deliver on this whole issue of access. Now, from my understanding, if there is going to be a problem, we'll have to look at it. But from my understanding, this was supposed to make sure that the parents' contribution would be redundant. But if it is not the case, I think we can talk to the education minister and see how to address this issue. But the whole issue of training and putting the teacher at the center is what we have said we are going to do. And this is what we are doing. As I told you, even one of the achievements that we had immediately was to give a contract for ICT training for 1,400 teachers, right? For that to happen. And what you are also saying is that the district directorates of education don't see any money dropping in the districts. And this is something that we will have to relook at. We are investing a lot more in the education sector. This year alone, almost 1 billion Ghana cedis more than last year. So you are going to see a difference, and I'm hoping that difference will be, I'll be checking to see how much drops at the districts. Since you've told me that since 2012, no dropping of resources at the districts, I think my team here will have to put our eye on what is stopping the money from dropping. Usually there's some interference somewhere, and we'll have to figure out what it is so that we can help. But I think that the investment in the education has been increased significantly. We are going to see a lot more use of ICT in education, and we hope that teachers will be trained more in that direction, so that you may not necessarily have to have physical textbooks, but you could have them over the internet and so on in many areas. So we can move on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I'll now invite Lavinia Dimensa, the Deputy Executive Director of WANEP. She has the next question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for your presentation and your one achievement. I'm eagerly wondering what the achievement for tomorrow will be. But let me come back to the issue of security, because I think it's at the heart of most of the achievements you talked about. I think the bigger issue for me is sustainability of all the good things you started. And it comes back to how to create a right environment that attracts the kind of investment and the kind of businesses that are required for development and for growth. And I think in that regard, I want to come back to the issue of not just the vigilante groups, but we've seen Abu Glushi, the strip on it. I think it's a reflection of a broader issue of a culture of violence. And what I want to know is, what is the plan, the strategy for violence prevention? You talked about rule of law, but I think rule of law is very reactive. But how do we look at it's important, though, but then how do we begin to build preventive strategies? We have National Peace Council. How are we strengthening the National Peace Council? How are we looking at other stakeholders and other frameworks for violence prevention? Since it's one person, one question, I'll keep it to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lavinia. I would also like to invite right now Pauline van der Paling, is with the Network for Women's Rights. Netright here has a question. Okay. Because of the distance, let me quickly invite, who do we have next on with Andy, a final year student, UCC? Great.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. My question is actually simple. His Excellency the President, has said several times that his vision for Ghana is one of a country beyond aid, mobilizing its, human and then material resources. Mr. Vice President, as head of the economic management team, in your own view, by the end of the first term, of this government, what do you think, or what do you, foresee to be the state of the Ghanaian economy by the end of your first term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrington, you have 2 questions to answer?
Thank you very much. I think that the issue of violence is very, very important, as was raised by Sister from Wanep. I think violence usually arises when you have disputes, and how we prevent those disputes from coming up in the first place will have to be very, very important. I think we have to engage all the stakeholders, the chiefs, and the queen mothers, the various people in all areas in discussing issues before they get into aspects of violence to be used to resolve matters. I think that a lot more discussion of issues on the ground, whether it's in Agbogbloshie, because there are apparently issues that were already simmering, and we could have probably addressed them a bit earlier than allow it to then erupt into violence, and then we are now trying to resolve it. So I think that having early warning systems to actually say that there is a problem here, there is a tension here, if we don't address it early enough, it could result in violence. I think that that sort of intelligence, we need assistance of our security agencies to give us that sort of intelligence. Because if you start addressing potential disputes early enough in terms of talking and discussion, whether the Peace Council is engaging or the House of Chiefs is engaging, depending on which bodies, to resolve the issue, we could get a lot more prevention of violence than what we are getting at the moment. I think we need a lot more intelligence on the potential hotspots and engage in these, because the cost of dealing with these violent situations is much, much more than strengthening some of the institutions that would actually end up dealing with these issues. So I think we have to look at that cost-benefit analysis and make the right choices. The question on Ghana beyond aid, it is really critical. No country really is going to develop by depending on aid. We have to move away from a dependency on aid for our development. And this is really what is driving Nana Akufo-Addo's vision for this country. And clearly, the way we have started, clearly, by the end of our first term, by the grace of God, we will move away this economy. I expect to see an economy that is transformed and depending on its own resources for its development. That is really where we are headed, and that is where Nana Akufo-Addo is taking this country to, a transformed economy, an economy that is standing on its own feet and making its own decisions for development. So I am very optimistic about taking Ghana to a country beyond aid.
Thank you very much. We have a contribution from Madam Joy Zai.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, I'd like to commend you on the 1 day, 1 achievement, even though it's 1 day plus 1 or something like that. Thank you very much for that incisive report. I'd like to commend what is being done in the area of illegal mining. And I'm glad that we're taking an integrated approach, especially in ensuring that we have designated properly mineralized areas for regulated mining. Because I strongly believe that we should encourage Ghanaians in mining. But Your Excellency, I'd like to posit that Ghana, though awash with gold, has other minerals that lend themselves more readily into development.
That's right.
So we really need to move away from just focus on gold mining to go into the other lesser known minerals, one of which is kaolin, and then you have feldspar and so on, so that we can promote Ghanaians in mining. Even shell banks in some of the coastal areas, Adodi, they grow and they form shell banks which can be used in the cement factory and so on. So, Your Excellency, I think a positive attitude towards Ghanaians in mining, focusing on not gold, but other minerals that would actually aid our development would be the way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I share those views. I mean, as a country, a lot of the times we forget how much we really have in terms of resources, and you are just pointing that out again. And I think it is definitely important because some of these minerals are in very, very high demand, much higher priced per ton than gold, and we should look at them.
Right, we have time for just one more question before the power of technology allows us to be joined by some of our audience on social media. This last question comes from Mr. Alexander Williams. He's a member of the Advocacy Committee for the Ghana Blind Union.
Okay. Thank you, Kojo, and thank you, His Excellency the Vice President. So briefly, I would just want to find out, so far as blind and partially sighted persons as well as print disabled persons are concerned, only 1% of published books or reading materials are in accessible format. The union led an effort as a result to have the Marrakesh Treaty ratified by the previous government. This could not happen. What is your government's commitment towards the ratification of the Marrakesh Treaty? And again, what is your government's commitment towards improving the participation of persons with disabilities in general in the governance process after we've actually seen a drop from having a representation as a Minister of State of where persons with disabilities are concerned to a regional minister, as well as a drop from 99 to 55% of members at the assembly level who are government appointees? What is there to improve the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the governance process? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the President and this government is very committed to actually making sure that we provide the necessary resources for persons with disabilities to function adequately in our society. As you know, we have said in our manifesto and in our budget that came out that even the area of contracts, for example, for the private sector, that 70% of all government-funded or taxpayer-funded contracts have to go to local companies. And of that 70%, 30% of that will have to go to persons with disabilities and the youth, for example. So you'll see some focus with resources to get people who have disabilities to actually have access to government contracts so that they can actually produce and or be employed in various areas. As far as specific, employment within the government machinery is concerned, I think we are also very, very committed to that. The Marrakesh Treaty, I wasn't aware it had not been ratified, and so I'm going to take a look at it. I've not looked at it. I'm going to take a look at it, and hopefully I believe that we can do it. We can do it.
Right. So now, Your Excellency, we're going to take some questions from viewers at home. They've sent through their questions via WhatsApp video. So we'll draw our audience's attention to the large screens, and Your Excellency, you can watch on either of the screens to your left or right. Here are 3 videos from our viewers via WhatsApp.
Thanks to Multimedia for giving me this opportunity to ask this question. My name is Zudana Azoda. I'm a senior advanced emergency medical technician with the National Ambulance Service. During campaign era, your party promised to lift the face of the National Ambulance Service if given the mandate. As you are currently aware, the service is at the verge of collapsing. The ambulances that were acquired in 2012 are of age now.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President. I have two quick questions. The first is on the microfinance scam that hits the Bonahafo regions and part of the northern region. I want to know the measures that have been put in place into ensuring that depositors get their monies back. And the second is on the one constituency, $1 million. We want to know whether the government has put in place any measures that will ensure that the monies that will be dispersed to the various constituencies will be used for the purpose for which it was sent for.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. My name is Hafiz. I have a very simple and short question to ask you. Following 100 days in office as MPP government, I'm sure you are quite aware that a number of government workers were owed arrears dating back to the previous government's era. May I know the measures your government is putting in place to get these arrears cleared as soon as possible? Thank you.
Your questions that we got in. We got from, of course, many of our viewers who join us on social media. This came in through Twitter and WhatsApp. Questions on ambulance, microfinance, scam, and of course the last one on arrears. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much. I think that on the ambulance matter, you've seen that we've basically provided the resources to the National Health Service. The ambulance specifically, I'm not exactly sure how much was allocated to the National Ambulance Service. So that is something I'll have to check. But they are basically making the point that this service is in tatters and needs support. And we are going to look at it. Again, this is also one of the reasons why this allocation of 1 million per constituency is so important and why it has to be used to address specific needs of the constituencies. You know, because sometimes you go to a constituency and there's a school, they've been waiting for 5 years for it to be roofed, and it is not there. But if you have $1 million equivalent as a constituency, and your local district hospital needs an ambulance and doesn't have it, you can buy that ambulance. This is what this is giving us the space to do. Every district, and I'm going to follow this up when we leave here, every district in this country with $1 million, every constituency in this country with $1 million can buy an ambulance this year, to support the National Ambulance Service. So the resources, if we use them appropriately, can solve major problems of the various constituencies. Because the point that we have made, they are talking about since 2012, they've had very little. This is exactly what we are saying, that if you wait for the central government, the money will never drop in the constituency. So we are taking the money to the constituency, and they will then use it to address some basic needs of the constituency. So we'll look specifically at that, but I think that it may be a good case to use part of this $1 million, because how much is an ambulance? If you have $1 million to spend, I'm sure, $50,000, you get a very good ambulance for the constituency. And it shouldn't really be a problem. And so we have to order our priorities at the constituency level. If it's a school you need to help build, you do it. But if those monies are used properly, we can really get a lot going on at the constituency level. And in that context, let me link it to the question that was asked as to how we are going to ensure that these monies are not frittered away or stolen. This has also been the big question when the idea came up that the president was very concerned about. And this is why we have said that these monies are going to be overseen by the development authorities. We are establishing 3 development authorities, and they will oversee the award of the contracts, they inspect the performance of the contracts before the payments are made. Nobody is going to, and the payments this time around, I mean, all government money is going to be at Bank of Ghana. So when the contract has been certified as having been executed, we will send the money from the Bank of Ghana straight to the contractor, so that there will be no intermediary to collect the money and spend them. So far, we have, this is a new policy. We're asking all major government institutions to open their accounts at the Bank of Ghana, to move the monies there, so that we can see what is going on, fili as you are moving, as you are moving the monies around. We will see how these monies are being used. There's so much waste and it's corruption. So we want to be able to monitor. So we are talking about, this is in the context of what we call the Treasury Single Account. So all government money will be essentially in one account. And from the Bank of Ghana, we are going to, and they will be enabled to be able to credit anybody's account anywhere in the country. So right from the central bank. And that's what we are going to implement. And so this 1 million, one constituency, nobody's going to transfer it into a constituency to be sitting down, to be sitting down waiting for things to do. No, it's going to be with government. It's your money as a constituency. But if you decide you want an ambulance and you've advertised and found the contractor to provide you the ambulance, we pay for the ambulance, and the ambulance will be delivered once everything is certified. So there's a real attempt to make sure we don't have misuse of these funds.
There's a question on microfinance camp.
Yes, DKM, I'm sure, is what was on his mind, and maybe God is Love and all of these other microfinance companies. And I think it's even broader. I mean, the banking system generally is not as strong. We've talked about it already, but his question has to do with the microfinance. There's, I think, from what I understand, Bank of Ghana is looking at, these microfinance companies, and we are going to. I'm not quite sure whether the payments are going to happen now, but I know that there's a review going on, not only of DKM, but some other microfinance companies. Our hope will be that they will be paid off, but you have issues of moral hazard and so on that we have to deal with. But I think that we will try to see, we'll revisit that issue. We haven't tackled it in the first 100 days, but I think that this is a wake-up call, that this issue is still hanging around. I'll see what the Bank of Ghana intends to do.
Well, thank you for handling all of those questions. Now, at this stage, we have to apologize for all of you who didn't get the opportunity to ask questions, whether in this auditorium or as part of our wider audience around the world. You can well imagine that the limitation of time did not permit for all questions to be heard and answered. But at this point, just before he leaves us, we'll give the Vice President the opportunity to take a minute or two to sum up his thoughts on this event and the issues that have been raised here.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Joy FM and the Multimedia Group for creating this platform for us to interact. At the time they asked me to do this, they must have caught me in a good mood. Subsequently, I was wondering what I had let myself in for, but I must say that this is actually been very, very interesting, very educative. And for us, I think it's very important that, Nana Akufo-Addo's views on the country, the economy, and so on, are shared. Because if you don't tell your own story, other people will tell it for you. And so we want to be able to make ourselves available to answer these questions that are on the minds of people. And I particularly cherish this particular session at 100 days, because when I leave here, it's going to be on my mind, the capitation grant matter. How is this working? Now, the Marrakesh Treaty, what have we done about it? If I hadn't come in for this interaction, I wouldn't have known that these are particular matters I should turn my attention to, and so on. So, Joyce has told us about kaolin and other minerals that we should probably turn our attention to as well. So this, for me, this early in the government is going to be very useful, because when we go back to the economic management team, we are going to be saying, this has been raised, NHIS, what do we need to do, so that if, by the grace of God, next year we return for a follow-up, I will have better answers to some of the questions. But I'm most grateful for all of your time. And I believe that Ghana, after these 100 days, from what I have seen from Nana Akufo-Addo, Ghana is in very good hands. We will work and make sure this economy comes into fruition. And we are going to keep working. We are keeping working. One day, one achievement. So far, we've done plus some jara. So thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Thank you all for coming. We will now take the national anthem.
Very much. Let's say a big thank you once again to the Office of the Vice President and His Excellency himself, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Thank you so much for gracing our event. And for those of you watching and listening on the Joy News channel and Joy 99.7 FM, we thank you so much for making the time to join us in this special event. Stay with us for the duration as we continue with analysis of today's activities on the Joy News channel and on Joy 99.7 FM. My name is Kojo Yankson.
My name is Evans Mensah, and Gifty will be continuing from here, getting reactions from the auditorium, how people are reacting to today's event. And we'll also bring you some reactions from across the regions, I'm told.